all these therapies from a traditional standpoint, they target a particular molecule for a disease state, a protein or whatnot. From a digital standpoint, it's all about software. We can call software a biomarker. What is that software variable, you can say, or a biomarker that is associated with the disease, and really going about identifying that biomarker for a specific disease.
Welcome to the Life Sciences Leadership Podcast, where we delve deep into the life sciences industry and uncover effective strategies, innovations, and future trends. Your host, Axtria's Jasmeet Soni, engages highly acclaimed leaders in discussions focused on directing commercial success in the life sciences industry. Whether you're transforming your commercial success strategy or just craving dynamic discussion, this is the show for you.
Hello everyone, I'm your host Jasmeet Soni and welcome to the Life Sciences Leadership Podcast brought to you by Axtria. Our goal with this show is to bring to you effective strategies, innovations, and most importantly, people who are driving improved business and patient outcomes within the life sciences industry. I'm excited to have a very dynamic leader as a guest today, Ivan Pandiyan. Ivan is a global product and technology visionary who has launched multiple innovative and disruptive products from concept to commercialization. He has expertise in strategic planning and growth strategies and effectively translates business goals and customer needs to develop and launch highly complex and innovative products. Ivan serves as a mentor and senior advisor at innovative startup incubators such as G Beta MedTech and MN Cup. He's an expert in technology-led strategy planning and exponential growth. Ivan is currently the Vice President of Global R&D at Natus Medical Incorporated. In this role, he is responsible for teams across North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific. He leads technology and product strategy roadmaps and achieves strategic innovation through research, partnerships, technology licensing, and acquisitions. Ivan, great to have you on the Life Sciences Leadership Podcast and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jasmeet. Pleasure to be here.
Ivan, today we are talking about digital therapeutics, which is an exciting new area that has the potential to become a key growth driver for many life sciences companies. For our audience that does not fully understand this new area, can you tell us what are digital therapeutics and how are they different from traditional therapies?
Great question, Jasmeet. So digital therapeutics, as we know, therapy is really trying to cure a disease or disorder. So all along, we have known if we have any issues, we have pills. We take pills. That's what the pharma companies have been working on for decades to cure a disease. Lately, after that, we had stimulators who would stimulate from an electrical standpoint, and that would cure diseases. The new area of digital therapeutics is really using software without any chemicals or any of their side effects to cure diseases. That's digital therapeutics. So you don't have any side effects from a chemistry standpoint or a pill standpoint, but you're really using software, intervening with the patients and really getting the therapy to cure a certain disease or state. And that is fascinating because you would think software was in the past helping you do things better, but actually software could cure a certain disease state. That's phenomenal. And that's great growth opportunities for us going forward into the future.
Yeah, that is phenomenal. Thanks for clarifying it for the audience, Ivan. This is really helpful. Now, many of us who have been in the industry for a long time understand how traditional therapies are developed, as you just pointed out. Can you talk about discovery of digital therapies? How do you go about finding and validating efficacy of the digital therapies?
No, that's a great question, right? So all these therapies from a traditional standpoint, they target a particular molecule for a disease state, a protein or whatnot. From a digital standpoint, it's all about software. We can call software a biomarker. What is that software variable, you can say, or a biomarker that is associated with the disease, and really going about identifying that biomarker for a specific disease. And you would know that by moving, or changing the value of that biomarker, you can actually cure the disease. So really finding the correlation in identifying the biomarker that is correlated to the disease. So by controlling the biomarker, you're actually controlling the cure of the disease. So that is an absolute discovery process that is going to come through a lot of data, through analysis and research, that it's not just protein that is related to a disease, but what is a software biomarker with so much data in front of us to identify that software biomarker that is correlated to a specific disease. And then you are really, I would say, changing the biomarker, modulating it to cure the disease. So that's how we're going to be finding the efficiency and validation of the therapies.
And that is quite a shift. Every time I do the episode, I learn something new. Software biomarker is a new term I just learned, and it's fascinating. In fact, I would imagine digital therapeutics is a paradigm shift even for the FDA, and many of the players involved are tech and software companies that do not understand the FDA approval process or regulation requirements and compliance requirements. On the flip side, FDA must be trying to ensure such therapies are effective and don't end up causing harm. How are both sides coping up with this change?
Great question, right? So I think as the digital therapeutics come into play, there is a lot of startup companies, mostly very specialized in the tech space, are trying to enter into the digital therapeutics. It's not going to be just the software, but here the software is applied on a disease, and there is patient involved, there is human lives involved. So there is a rigorous process that FDA will call out for these tech companies, which these tech companies have to pass through. So the tech companies, as they are looking into it, they can't just focus on technology, but they also need to focus on the process where the technology, what the risks are by applying this technology in the patients. Today, FDA will ask for efficacy studies, clinical trials for these software companies, which is new. So those are the new skill set these startup companies will have to gain, because when FDA is looking at an approval for a therapy, they're always going to look for risk versus benefit. And these tech companies will need to be clearly articulating what the benefits of I would say, the software digital therapeutics versus the risks, and then make sure that the benefits far exceeds the risks. So that's the difference, I would say, from a tech company standpoint. They really need to understand it's not just tech, but it is a product that is impacting patients' lives. And from FDA standpoint, they don't want to kill innovation, but at the same time, how could they guide these tech companies towards the process where these innovation can be translated into helping the bigger cause of humanity and really progressing forward from a disease therapy standpoint.
Yes, absolutely. So Ivan, it seems both sides are trying to figure out a way forward. Now, I believe one of the biggest challenges is the safety of these therapies. Are digital therapies safe? And how are regulatory authorities ensuring public health safety? Are there specific guidelines or boundaries that FDA has established to ensure safety?
I mean, I would say FDA, first and foremost, reason is to make sure that the products are safe and effective. So safety is an area that the FDA will really dig into. So there are risk management activities that the tech companies can do. And those risk management activities, you want to make sure that the safety is never, ever compromised. So in terms of the boundaries, I think it's no different than how FDA would look into a normal therapy. It could be a pill therapy, because the process is the same in terms of the outcome. Basically, you are trying to resolve or cure a disease. Instead of pill, you're using software now. So from that angle, the FDA is not going to change their approach. What they will look for is the kind of data that these therapy companies can bring forward to really prove that these therapies are safe by having a proper sample size, by applying, from a sample study with the hospitals, really showing the proof that these therapies work. Because it's also going to be important that as these therapies are going into play, there are reimbursement challenges that these therapies, companies will have to muster, because as they roll out, these therapies will be, in my mind, prescribed by the physician, and these companies will want to, from a profitability standpoint, they will have to work with they call payers, who are insurance providers. And these studies will not only help with the FDA approval, but also show these payers how they are able to save money for these payers at the same time, help cure these diseases. So those are the three-prong approach that these tech companies will have to see from a safety standpoint. But again, this is going to pay them in dividends as they work through all these challenges.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I'm pretty sure these boundaries and rules are evolving, rapidly evolving, I would say, and we'll likely have a much better understanding of them in the near future. Ivan, I do have a question now that has been on my mind since I became aware of this new area of digital therapeutics. Are digital therapeutics applicable only to specific therapy areas, or are we going to see development across all therapy areas?
That's a great question. So if you paint a picture, right, just like any other technology, it's going to start small in a specific niche area, and then it will be growing further. So I would say initially there is a lot of application of digital therapeutics on the mental health space. If we see the trend, if we see the statistics and data on where the digital therapeutics are really played now, significantly, it's a mental health space, because now you could see from a mental health standpoint. In fact, there's a lot of video games companies that they have gotten approvals from FDA to really show that, well, if somebody is going to play the video game, it's going to be beneficial to the patient in a certain fashion. So that is fascinating, because there you're really, moving your brain's neurons, or, how you approach life from a brain standpoint. You're able to, cure a certain state, like you could say depression. In depression, obviously there's a chemical imbalances, happening in your brain, but at the same time, you could use a software to streamline, how the brain works, and you can actually help somebody feel better. So those are the clinical studies that is happening today, and that is an area of promise. And I believe that once these data come into play, there is more success, and there is no more reimbursement structure involved. There is more confidence. I'm confident this will expand into other areas. You can say cardio, neuro, the medical device space. There is no stopping to see, where it can grow into. It's exciting space. At the same time, people, in healthcare, folks are really cautious for the right reasons. So I can only imagine it can be expanding to further, different modalities. But I would say now is growing a lot in the mental health space.
That is something exciting. So my takeaway would be that we'll see digital therapies playing a role in a large number of disease areas. Ivan, since we're talking about digital, I have to ask you, what is the role of data, software, and AI in developing and delivering these therapies?
So, Jasmine, you liked my word, software biomarkers, right? So that's where I'm going back into, like, where you'll have like troves of data, which we are gathering and generating, over the course of years. So the key is really understanding and identifying the software biomarker attributed to a specific disease state. And that's where the data, software, and AI will come into play for digital therapies, right? So one is, you really need to have data to know that there is a software biomarker attributed to a certain disease. And using that biomarker, you are going to be developing your algorithm. In this case, you can have an AI algorithm, which can automatically learning along the way and get better. I think FDA has some specific guidelines they put boundaries on to make sure that the patient safety is not impacted during the self-learning process. But then you will have the software to really implement that AI algorithm using the data you have been gathering. So that's kind of how these three will play in the digital therapy space, where you would have an hypothesis or research on what is the biomarker that is attributable to a disease that will cure the disease, get an algorithm to prove that by modulating that attribute, you're able to adjust the disease state, and then you will have software to implement those algorithms and really distribute that software. Essentially, in fact, software is that pill that you're distributing to the patients and the consumers to help live a better life. So that's how they will be all related together. And then you would apply the same thing in a different area of medicine or modality.
That makes sense. Ivan, you're right. We see it every day in the work we do at Axtria. Software and AI are changing everything, and it comes as no surprise that it is going to be critical in developing and delivering these digital therapies. Now, If we were to compare or talk about the transition from traditional therapies, will the development in digital therapeutics affect the traditional therapies that are pill dependent? In other words, will digital therapies compete or complement traditional therapies?
So I see this as a continuum. Like we know that, like when you say pill is like drug development takes decades. So what the digital therapeutics would do is, I would say, in my mind, complement, because it can be faster. I don't think you need 10 years, maybe you sometimes, but I think you don't need 10 years to develop a digital therapy program in my mind. So that digital therapy bringing into the market could be faster, and it could be more specialized in the areas where it'll be very effective. The pharma pill is a huge market, and then there is a lot of disease states. I think it's much more mature, and there is a lot of even biotech companies working on that development. So in my mind, both will complement. Maybe some point in future where you have robots doing a lot of automation, you may see the digital therapy slowly growing and encroaching the traditional therapy from a pharma standpoint. But I think that is a longer process. But I would see digital therapy is more targeted in certain areas where the value is much higher compared to pharma. For example, I said mental health is specialized now and is growing, and we don't know where the next one could be cardio, and then it will further proceed from there on. And that's kind of how I see it.
Ivan, frankly, I can't fully imagine how this will play out when digital either replaces or complements traditional therapies. And in some ways, it's doing it right now. Regardless, I can see how it will be transformational. In terms of the maturity curve, where do you see digital therapeutics at this time? And what are the challenges faced by companies developing these products?
Digital therapeutics is a great question. Digital therapeutics is in the early stages, right? So we are really learning about digital therapeutics. The insurance companies who are payers are really learning about how do we pay for the digital therapeutic. Physicians are like prescribing. They'll be prescribing, some medicine. They'll be prescribing an app for the patient, right? Oh, go through this app. Spend 30 minutes on this app. I mean, that is like a paradigm shift. And then the same thing with FDA too. They are trying to grapple with the digital therapy space. So all the constituents in the healthcare space are learning about digital therapy and really figuring out how to adapt their approach to accommodate the digital therapy, because it can be valuable to the entire participant in the ecosystem. So I believe that we are in the early stages of digital therapeutics. There is a lot of interest. As AI also comes into fruition, you will see the digital therapeutics even grow further, because then you will have all this big data, and biomarker detection could be much easier. And then you also could compete, because biotech companies are multi-billion-dollar companies. So this will be a disruptive fashion for those big companies. The challenges faced by these digital therapeutic companies, again, are getting confidence from all the stakeholders, getting the credibility. Those are the things that these digital therapy companies will have to compete to really gain the growth that is in front of them.
And Ivan, that makes sense. And as you rightly suggested, this is an evolving field. And as things mature, my hope is that these challenges will over time resolve. We have come to the tail end of our conversation, and I would love to end with this question. Can you talk about some successes in digital therapeutics that are indicative of the future?
Absolutely. I think there are great, I would say, indicators of future growth. Indicators meaning, as I mentioned earlier on, that the digital therapeutics are being used as an app for like mental health, for depression, for anxiety. There are video games. I mean, we love to play video games. I think a lot of folks, not all of them, but those who play video games, is just something they just enjoy. At the same time, it helps improve their perspective of life. It is proven with clinical studies. So that is a fascinating thing to me, that the data is supporting that these apps can, in fact, improve your depression state, can, in fact, improve your anxiety disorders. that's a success. You're really altering, in my mind, the chemistry in the brain through these apps. And this is just a start. There will be more and more data. Again, as I said before, data is going to be the key here as we move forward to make it more and more success. And as folks see the outcome, the improvements, the easier improvements, without causing the side effects to the body, because any pill you take has side effects. This can be the future and really talked about. And I have already seen even pharma companies are dabbling into digital therapeutics because they know that this is the disruptive force that is coming, and then they want to get on the bandwagon. So those are the initial indicators. And I believe that as we move forward into the future, there'll be more and more indicators and data that may pan out, and then it will build on top of it.
Absolutely. I mean, it seems there's already some success in this area, and we're only going to see more of it in the future. Thank you so much for all those insights. Before we go, I would like to summarize our discussion so the audience has some key takeaways. So what I understand is, 1, digital therapeutics are real, and they are the future. We'll see them either replace or complement traditional therapies. 2, they have the potential to cure diseases without chemical side effects that come with traditional pharma therapies. And 3, currently digital therapeutics are applied in targeted areas, but more data will enable further development of the ecosystem in the digital therapy space. Ivan, thanks for an amazing conversation. It was an eye-opener for me in many ways. How diseases will be treated in the future is going to be radically different from how things are done today. In fact, the generations to follow might not even recognize the therapies that are commonplace today. You showed our audience a view of this future, which is extremely valuable. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience in this space. It has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
Pleasure's all mine too. Thank you, Jasmeet.
To the audience, well, as I always say, you are the most important part of the show. The tremendous success that we are seeing is because of you. Thank you so much for joining us today, and tune in soon for the next episode.
Thanks for joining us on the Life Sciences Leadership Podcast. If you loved this episode, please share with friends and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. For more information, visit lifesciencespodcast.com. Until next time.